Well. Tough day for those who thought the Giants' offense was cooked based on two shutout losses in New York, and also tough day for those who thought Anthony DeSclafani was done after 5 injury-plagued starts in 2022. The Giants erupt in Chicago.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. So check us out there if you have not already, and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Also, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And speaking of guaranteed rate field is where the Giants found themselves in this White Sox home opener and facing another kind of tough pitcher who had a really good first inning against the Giants. You're thinking, they're just going to be a team that's going to strike out 40% of the time and have trouble scoring runs. But nope. They blasted 7 homers in this blowout win against the White Sox, 12-3. Just a great all-around day. And I just want to say, when I say tough day for those who thought the Giants' offense was cooked and tough day for those who were counting out DeSclafani, no, it's a good day because we're all on the same side. If you're a Giants fan, even if you were critical, what you want is for this to happen. And so, no, I'm not gonna be hard on you for thinking that. But also, we're not going to overreact to this one game. But that's the beauty of baseball, right? You combine it all together, and that's what the team is. They're not the shutout team. They're not a team that's every day going to hit 7 homers. But if you combine it and you look at what have the Giants done on the season now, it's a small sample still, very small, but it starts to look a little more normal. And so, man, what a great game. Jock Peterson, once again, in both of the Giants' wins, gets it started with a solo homer that just kind of ignites the offense and gets people believing. And Michael Conforto hit one. I'm looking at the box score, and it's hard to even keep track of all the homers that they hit. Mike Yastrzemski hit one. David VR hit 2. Bryce Johnson hit one. That can't be it, is it? Thairo Estrada also hit a home run. So hard to be more impressive offensively than what the Giants put on display there yesterday. Michael Kopech, the White Sox pitcher, he's going to have a hard time whittling down that not only ERA, but also the home run rate. 5 home runs allowed by Michael Kopech. And Jock Peterson had a home run robbed. It would have been the 8th homer of the game for the Giants. I mean, it was earlier in the game, but still, they hit 7 homers, and they had one literally taken away by the center fielder jumping over the fence to catch it. And so this is the Giants' first. They hit 4 home runs in 1 inning, and it was their first 4 home run inning since 2011. And this was their first 7 home run performance since 2002, July 2nd, 2002. And so I think 8 was the record, or maybe 8 would have broken the record. But man, just what a great day for the offense. And it wasn't just about the offense. It was also a great season debut by Anthony DeSclafani, who, like I said, a lot of people were writing off after 5 injury-plagued starts in 2022. And so we're going to get into him a little bit later. But just to talk about the overall offense, I mean, another example, someone to talk about is Mike Yastrzemski, who, had the miserable spring training. I'm getting mailbag questions left and right. I'm getting people on Twitter telling me that Yastrzemski stinks and should be cut or sent to the minors. And, he had the first game in New York, I think he had 2 plate appearances and then was substituted out because they needed, it was a platoon situation. And people were reacting to that too. But guess what? After now 16 plate appearances, Yaz is hitting .357. He's got a .438 on base, and he's got a .786 slugging. So I'm not going to be doing victory laps here and saying he's done, he's a great player, he's an MVP candidate, because we still need more time. But it just goes to show you that one game with 2 strikeouts, 1 whole spring, it doesn't necessarily mean anything about what's going to happen when the season starts. And so you would think that we would learn this lesson because this has been a tale as old as time, but we just don't. And so next spring training, we'll be answering the same kinds of questions. But, Yaz is leading the team in essentially, in terms of their regular players. Bryce Johnson is now 1 for 2 with a homer. So technically he's leading the team in like weighted runs created plus. But for Yaz, 232, meaning 132% above average offensively. Obviously, you're looking at a small sample. Things look weird in small samples. But, Estrada has had a nice start to the season. David Villar with the 2 home runs has a 714 slugging percentage. But just the overall team numbers, because if you're looking at individual players right now, things are going to look weird. And there's really not, obviously it's encouraging to see some of these things, but it's not necessarily something you should read too much into, because throughout the course of the year, guys are going to have good stretches of 4 games. Guys are going to have poor stretches of 4 games. Like Conforto hit a homer yesterday, but he was having a very rough first few games, and it's not really something to freak out about. But the team as a whole, the numbers look somewhat normal in a way, in that it's a 239 average, which you might think sounds bad, except league average last year was about 242, so it's right in line with last year's league average batting average. But for the Giants, a nice 335 on base thanks to a significantly better than average 10.1% walk rate. Walk rate being one of the things that does stabilize the quickest, as does strikeout rate. We're not there yet, thankfully, because it's too high for the Giants right now. But we'll get to strikeout rate in a minute. But the Giants' slugging percentage at 464 and an isolated power of 225. And so, again, these numbers looked a lot different before yesterday's game, but that's the thing about baseball, is you take it all into account. You take the shutout losses into account. Like, some people are going to say to me, these numbers are meaningless because one game is skewing the data. Well, I would make the case that the 2 shutouts are also skewing the data, and that's what data is. You just combine it all, and that's ultimately what we're going to look at for the team performance. And so overall, it's a 123 weighted runs created plus, meaning about 23% above league average offense for the Giants overall. If you just took a random plate appearance from any of their first 4 games, you would expect about 23% above average offense out of that random plate appearance. That's kind of what that means. So the strikeout rate, I mentioned going into yesterday's game that it was unsustainably high. It was 37 point something percent, and I said that's not going to last. It's going to come down. And sure enough, one game later, it came down from 37 point something percent to 31.6%. So that's still higher than it's going to be. It is still leading the major leagues, but it is not yet something to read too much into. And it's a good sign when you're able to put up the overall kind of numbers that I just indicated and talked about with a strikeout rate that high, because it's just going to mean more hits. Like, when you put the ball in play, you're not always going to get a hit, but at least you get a hit sometimes. But when you strike out, it's always an out. There's no chance of a hit. And so anyway, that's kind of the Giants offense after 4 games on the season, 1 great game, a couple of horrible games, and also a pretty good one in between. So 2 pretty good days for the offense, including a great day, and then 2 absolutely dreadful days. Add it all together, and it's been fine. And the Giants are 2-2 on a tough opening series, opening season road trip. So anyway, coming up in just a minute, more about this, but also Tony D, Anthony DeSclafani, important, very important pitcher for the Giants, and he showed the 2021 version of himself yesterday. So we'll get into his performance in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite event, upcoming Giants games included, shouldn't be stressful. And I know that I, in the past, have had a lot of stress trying to find the tickets I want, getting slapped with last-minute fees, not being able to see a image of the view from the seat, which can kind of, especially if I'm in a foreign place, I really want to see that, and it's not always possible. But with Game Time, it is, and you get a lowest price guarantee. More about that guarantee. You'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So it's completely risk-free, and you know you're getting the best price. There's also flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Pretty much everything you could possibly want. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, as promised, more about this game, which has us seeing the world with rose-colored glasses. Because, yeah, I mean, if I'm telling you not to get too worked up about 2 shutout losses in New York, I should also be telling you don't get too worked up about the explosion in Chicago. And that's true, but it's a combination. And when we combine it all, it looks pretty good. And I mean, seeing a young guy like David VR hit 2 home runs, including a grand slam. I'm not sure I mentioned one of his homers was a grand slam. It's just nice to see. And also, like I said, with the rough day narrative, rough day, I was hearing a lot of talk about how Casey Schmidt should be the Giants' opening day third baseman. To heck with David VR. Like, as if David VR didn't deserve the opportunity that he's getting. All he did was win the MVP of the Pacific Coast League last year, come up to the majors and kind of tear it up in the month of September. And I mean, he's doing it again. He's just, all he does is just go out there and kind of hit homers pretty consistently. And so he's very deserving of this opportunity, and great to see him capitalize on this start. And also, how about defensively? Just a shout out to the Giants so far. It is 4 games, and they haven't necessarily been tested with a ton of tough plays, but they've had some difficult plays, and they've made pretty much all of them. Lamont Wade Jr. scooping balls out of the dirt. David VR, I mean, he kind of got bailed out on a bad throw. I think it was in the game in Chicago. But, you know, in terms of like fielding the ball, I haven't seen any balls go underneath gloves yet. It's going to happen. Mistakes happen. But the Giants defense has been pretty solid through 4 games. And, you know, that's too early to make a grand declaration. It took quite a while before we kind of, the defensive theme of last year became so apparent. But, you know, Yastrzemski in center field, he lost 1 ball in the sun in New York, but you really can't fault a guy if you can't see the ball. It's not really like bad defense. It's more just unfortunate. But otherwise, he's run down some balls. I think yesterday in Chicago, he made a nice play running down some balls. Conforto has looked solid in right. Blake Sable hasn't really been tested in left. He's just kind of had normal opportunities, nothing too crazy. Crawford has made some nice plays. Estrada has been good. Like I said, Wade digging out some balls. Roberto Perez has been as advertised defensively. And so Giants, you know, looking solid, and I'm pretty optimistic. And then if you got a guy like Anthony DeSclafani, who's your 4th starter right now, I mean, he's starting the 4th game of the year. The Stripling start was really bad. And so, I mean, maybe DeSclafani is your 3rd starter or whatever. But it was just a vintage start for Tony. I think he prefers to go by Tony, and so I'm going to start calling him Tony more consistently. A vintage start by Tony DeSclafani, 2021 version of himself. I mean, we're not just talking about results-based version of himself. We're talking about the quality of the stuff, the velocity, the movement, and the command. It was all there for him in 6 shutout innings against a potent lineup in a difficult park to pitch. Like, look at what the Giants did offensively in this game. Guaranteed Rate Field in Chicago there is one of the most homer-friendly parks in the majors. Giants took advantage. The White Sox eventually did hit a homer in this game against Sean Manaea, who made his season debut, but nothing against Tony D. Tony D went 6 innings, gave up 3 hits, I think 1 double and 2 singles, no walks, struck out 4. And just like I said, the movement of his pitches, the command, and the velocity, he had it all. He had it all working. And so, again, I'm going to joke, tough day for those who were, like, I've had a lot of people coming at me, like, cut this guy. Like, last year, people, I just don't understand it, honestly. You look at what did he do in 2021, and he was just quietly extremely effective. I mean, he had a 3.17 earned run average for the Giants in 2021. People kind of get caught up in that he struggled against the Dodgers and he struggled in his 1 postseason appearance. But like I said, if he's kind of at the back end of your rotation, giving you a 3.17 ERA, come on. That's, most teams have nothing close to that going on. And so I'm not going to overreact to one start, but just this is one of those things where it doesn't take a huge sample to just see the quality of his pitches. And he really couldn't have been any better. And so it was great to see. I'm not promising he's going to have a great year. He could always regress. He could get hurt again, whatever. But he had kind of serious ankle surgery, missed like all of last season after making a handful of starts. But great to see him back, and a good reminder of how effective he was in 2021. And this was a 3-year contract they gave him after 2021. And so he's here. There's no opt-out, anything like that. He is guaranteed to be paid by the Giants in 2023 and 2024. And so getting him back on track is crucial for the health of this season's team and next season's team. And so, it was just very pleasing to see that. And then they've got guys like Sean Manaea coming out of the bullpen. Manaea has formerly been at the front of an Oakland rotation that was really good. They've also got Alex Wood, who hasn't even pitched yet, who's going to start, I think, the third game of the series. They pushed up Logan Webb, who's going to start the second game of the series. Giants are going to face a really tough pitcher in Dylan Cease. So if you want that strikeout rate to improve, it might not happen until later, because Cease is a strikeout machine. He's their ace, and he is a legitimate ace. And so that's who the Giants are going to face in their next game. But Logan Webb will go for the Giants, so we'll see how that all plays out. But from a pitching standpoint, I mean, Sean Manaea, it's interesting to talk about him. He came in and he was throwing hard, just like we saw in the spring. He threw 97.2 miles an hour on a pitch to Eloy Jimenez, and it was the hardest pitch he's thrown in his career. And I think this is according to Alex Pavlovich. He says Sean Manaea had thrown just 20 pitches at 96 plus miles an hour in his first 7 seasons in the big leagues, but he did it 6 times in his first inning as a Giant. The 97.2 mile an hour sinker was the hardest pitch of his career, edging a fastball he threw to Mike Trout when he was a rookie. And so we had the same conversation about Alex Cobb last season. Some people come at me with like, why would you want to throw harder? It's just going to make him more susceptible to injury. But the reality is it's a good thing to throw harder. And, Alex Cobb had a pretty darn healthy season. I think last year, the only time he missed was with like a hamstring strain. And so it didn't end up materializing that way. I don't know that that's true at all about just being able. It's not like, I think that part of the way they get velocity is just cleaned up mechanics, which might make you less susceptible to injury, in my opinion. It's not like you're just exerting yourself harder than you possibly should. It's more just like maximizing your biomechanics. And so anyway, the fact is you can throw harder, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be effective. And that's what happened with Sean Manaea, who had a pretty rough outing. He went 2 innings, gave up 3 runs, gave up a homer, walked 2, gave up 2 hits, and struck out just 1. And then Tyler Rogers came in and pitched a clean, 1, 2, 3 inning to close it out. But for Manaea, I think like it might take, first of all, it's first appearance of the year. You're geeked up. Second of all, it's 1 outing, not necessarily something to read into. Third of all, it just might take a minute for him to get used to having the improved stuff. And overall, I think it just bodes well for him and for the Giants if he's out here throwing 97, whereas he was a low 90s guy before. So coming up in just a minute, we'll wrap this up and turn the page to what is to come on the rest of this road trip and what to expect out of the Giants in these final 2 games in Chicago and just the big picture stuff in just a minute. But before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by Ultimate Baseball GM. This is the coolest game I've played in a long time. I thought I could be a great Major League GM, and it turns out it's not that easy. You're going to have to, in this game, worry about everything from hiring the right coaches and staff, managing team finances, scouting and drafting players, managing difficult personalities and chemistry and injuries, navigating your franchise through free agency and all the ups and downs of a season. It's really fantastic because I know for me personally, this is something I always dreamed of, and I'm able to apply those dreams and skills into this game. And you can really test your knowledge, compare yourself and how you're able to perform with your franchise with your friends. You might get fired. They might get fired. It's a good time all the way around, and you try to avoid getting canned with your franchise. So Locked On Giants listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probaseballgm.com, scan the code, or look it up in the app stores. That's probaseballgm.com. Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, as promised, more just San Francisco Giants talk. I want to just preview the next couple of games, but also discuss some more numbers for the team, because we talked about the hitters and the overall offensive line. There's more we can look into there. Like when we talk about the strikeout rate, I was kind of digging into the numbers and looking at what's behind it. And the Giants haven't been making a lot of contact. Their contact rate on swings is, I think it was tied for the worst in the game. And so it's not necessarily something to get overly concerned about. They did face some nasty pitching in New York. They got shut down by a rookie, but like Garrett Cole was just vintage Garrett Cole. Michael Kopech is pretty nasty. Dylan Cease is pretty nasty, but they're also, what I've seen from the Giants offense, home runs and offensive explosion aside, is that they're seemingly a little bit over anxious to do something, like, and that's kind of common when you're scuffling as an offense, is that you overcompensate by maybe chasing. And I think that the key for this Giants offense, which we started to see more of in this game against the White Sox, is they've got to lay off the pitches out of the zone. So if we look at like the overall team kind of chase rate, for example, we can look it up right now actually as I'm discussing this, but the Giants, their outside the zone swing rate is 30.1%, which is among the higher rates in the game. It's number 20 out of 30 teams. And typically the last couple years, certainly in 2021, they're like first in terms of not chasing out of the zone. And so when you're chasing out of the zone, and you're not making contact, the Giants are seeing the lowest percentage of pitches in the strike zone, actually second lowest at 46.3%. So pitchers are realizing this team is chasing right now, and so they're not throwing it in the zone, and the Giants are swinging and missing a lot. But it's not something to worry about, because I think we started to see it in the game on Monday, that you start to lay off of those pitches, and then the pitchers are forced to come in, and then this offense has a lot of power up and down the lineup. And if you throw them a ball in the strike zone where they like it, they're liable to do damage. And so when all is said and done, it's probably a team that's going to walk a lot and hit a lot of homers. And we kind of didn't see that at times, and they were a little bit over anxious and chasing. So I just wanted to mention those kind of behind the scenes type of numbers and point out that I don't think that those are going to last, and that that's a good thing, because that would be a problem if these did last, but I really don't think that they will. So now just the overall pitching numbers for the Giants, they don't look great, but the thing is, this is where a number like xFIP comes into play. And so what do I mean by that? Well, the Giants have a 4.76 ERA on the season. This is a tiny sample. It's too early to look at these numbers and draw meaningful conclusions. Their fielding independent pitching is 5.36. And I think a lot of times people think, oh, the FIP is more advanced, and it kind of really tells the story. So if you have a high ERA and a low FIP, it's like, well, we can look past the ERA. But if the FIP is even higher than the ERA, what does that mean? Well, FIP is something that's very susceptible to home runs. And home runs are not something that stabilizes quickly, home run rates. And so for the Giants, they're allowing on average over 2 home runs per game. They're allowing 2.12 home runs per 9 innings, which is unsustainably high. It's not going to be anywhere close to that when the season is over. And so the xFIP gives you a like normal home run rate on your fly balls that you allow. And that number for the Giants is 3.71. So it's basically saying if they were allowing a more normal rate of home runs, their ERA would be expected to be about 3.7. And that's the 5th best mark in baseball. And so that is something to look at this moment in time as a positive. You're just not going to allow over 2 home runs a game. The last couple of years, I think I'm pretty confident in 2022 as well as 2021, Giants were first in the major leagues at preventing home runs. And so this is a number I do not expect to last at that rate. Giants are allowing home runs on 29% of their fly balls, which is the highest in the major leagues, and it's just not going to last. At the end of the year, it'll be around 10%. So about 3 times as many fly balls are being converted into home runs as we would expect. And they're getting a lot of ground balls at 51.1%, which is the 4th highest rate in the majors. It's actually tied for 3rd. So when all is said and done, I'm encouraged by what I've seen from the San Francisco Giants through 4 games. Numbers like the home run to fly ball ratio. I mean, the same is true with the Giants offense. If we look at their overall offense and we look at the home run to fly ball ratio, I am having trouble finding it, but there it is 31%, which leads the major leagues. And so on both levels, the Giants hitters will not homer on 31% of their fly balls, but the Giants pitchers will not give up homers on 30% of their fly balls. And so we've seen a lot of homers 4 games into the season, but expect probably a lower rate by the hitters and a lower rate by the pitchers. A little more in the ballpark play for the Giants moving forward. But all in all, through 4 games, I'm encouraged. It's been up, it's been down, but the overall look of it is encouraging to me. So anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Now for your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot. So thanks in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.